This video is about line theory, and is more so to help you with your observation skills than your technical skills. That's a good enough intro. Let's just jump in. There are two types of lines, straights and curves. You might have seen somewhere that there are three types of lines, straights, C's, and S's. But really we only need to consider straights and curves, because we can group these two together. After all, S's are just two C's attached to each other. So this video is just looking at these two types of lines. But before we get started, I want to introduce two concepts real quick. Weights and vectors. Let's first start with vectors. To oversimplify, you can think of vectors as simply direction. That's all there is to know. It's simply a direction. Weights, on the other hand, can be thought of more as an area where the viewer's eyes are meant to rest on. A good analogy would be weights are like magnets. Take this composition for example. The lines are the vectors drawing your eyes towards the center, and the circle is the weight where you're allowed to rest your eyes. To be fair, I did place the weight in the middle of the page, so composition is also a factor, but let's just ignore what I said as to not overcomplicate things. Weights are more prominent of a concept in shapes rather than lines, considering they are an enclosed area and usually bigger. Some shapes also behave as vectors, but that's for another video. Keep in mind that this is an extremely simple example. When you're actually drawing and applying art concepts, it's not going to be this plain or simple, but it's still very useful to keep in mind. With these two concepts in mind, we can finally talk about the lines themselves. So let's start with straights. Straights are very straightforward. Straight lines have a direction, and that guides the gaze of the viewer. Pretty simple. Yeah, that's it. There's not much else. Curves, on the other hand, are more complicated, so it's best to be aware of the anatomy of a curved line. When looking at a curved line, pay attention to the following. The peak of the curve, which is where the highest point of the curve is. Because of this bulge, this is also where the weight of the curve is, but usually the curve is so small that the weight is negligible, so you don't really have to consider this part. All you really need to do is to pay attention to the position of the peak. In this case, it's in the center. Sometimes the peak is asymmetrical, so keep that in mind. The ratio of the curve. Basically, you're comparing the height of the curve with its length to get a ratio. For the ratio, I generally like to separate them into three groups. In this case, the ratio is 1 to 3, 1 to 5, and 1 to 9. It's a little arbitrary, but my personal definition is if the length is 1 to 3 times the height, it's considered big. If it's 4 to 7 times, it's considered medium, and any larger than that, then it's considered small. You might agree or disagree, just try to find your own definition so it's easier to categorize and analyze the sizes of these curves. Again, this is just to help categorize these ratios and simplify these types of lines for me. So if I see a curve, I'll be like, oh, that's a medium curve, and then I'll keep that in mind when trying to draw the curve. The vector of the curve. Take the start and end points of the curve and draw a line through them. This is the vector, or in other words, this is the direction of the line. To practice, what you could do now is to look at a real life reference and try to practice this analysis on the curves that you see. You'd find that there are actually a lot of curves and almost zero straight lines. So in a way, mastering the art of curves is like mastering making realistic lines. Now, why do we even care about this? Well, for one, straight lines very rarely happen naturally at all. So most lines in real life are curved lines. Only time straight lines would occur would be in things that are man-made. Hence why artworks with straight lines tend to give off a more urban and modern feeling. I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but mastering curves means mastering real life lines. The next concept has a less practical application, and it's just more good to know. So it's just more knowledge rather than a technique. There are two types of curves, and they are determined by the concavity of the curve. If the curve bulges out, it is a form curve. If it bulges in, it is a speed curve. Pretty self-explanatory, I think. Form curves create form, and speed curves kind of make the eyes travel along them faster, I think. Maybe I'm crazy. But point is that the speed curve goes in, and the form curve goes out. I'm gonna be honest, it's not super useful, but it is good to know. Very easy example is the abdomen. Here's one with a form curve, and here's one with a speed curve. I guess what you could try to do is to spot these in real life references too. I'm saying I'm guessing because even I don't do this that much. You can do it if you're feeling up for it. This next section is going to talk about S-curves, or more specifically, how to deal with them. You basically just divide them into smaller C-curves and then analyze them separately. That's it. Easy peasy. In conclusion, lines are very important. This is a lot of theory and ancient wisdom, so don't feel demotivated if you can't wrap your head around it in day one. Give it like a week or so and it'll probably become second nature. And the best part is that since it's an observation technique, you can practice it outside when you're going on a walk. If you're going on a walk. That's all for this time. Thank you for watching, and good luck on your art journey.